All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call our meeting to order. So we have here the Addison Central School District Board of Directors meeting for January 11th, 2018. Good evening, everyone. We will begin, as we do, with introductions of those of us at the table, for those of you in the audience. Begin down there.
Jason and Jaquette Hoffman, Perry Hansen,
Jen Newceder,
Nick Rolston,
Lorraine Morse,
Victoria Jetty.
I'm Peter Conlon.
Peter Burrow, Superintendent.
Ruth Hardy,
Josh Quinn, Business Manager.
Chip Malcolm.
Rick Eady,
Mary Gill.
Steve Warzak.
Thank you all. So tonight, as we have in our past few meetings, we have a rather robust agenda tonight, but obviously a big part of it is our school budget. Normally we have a public comment period at the beginning of our meeting. I think what we will do is if you're here to comment on the budget, we'll save that till after our budget presentation. But if anybody is here for a public comment about something else, now is the time for public comment. Thank you. Well, seeing none, we'll move on to our business at hand on the agenda with a recommendation to approve the minutes of 12/18/2017. A second? Anybody?
second.
Thank you. Okay, so minutes, any additions, corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from December 18th, 2017, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? All right. Okay, bills. Finance Committee. Ruth.
We have bills from December 27th. Chip and I came in during everybody's break and signed the bills for $289,303.74 for the general fund. And then this Monday, the 8th, Victoria and Mary signed the bills. General fund, $155,156.24. The Mary Hogan Food Service, $42,739.11. And the MUMS and MUHS Food Service, $66,380.78.
So as everybody knows the process, two board members go through the bills, and that's what the report is from. Any questions? I need
So
motions.
moved.
Thank you. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Victoria. All those in favor of approving the bills, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And we've paid the bills. Getting back to our sort of rotation as we go from school to school throughout, and we get a presentation from the school. We have that tonight from Middlebury Union High School. I'm going to turn the floor over to Principal Bill Lawson for an introduction.
Great, thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be very brief and introduce Karen Van Severn, who is going to introduce our students, and they're going to make a presentation.
All right. I'm the student council advisor. These are our student council representatives. Why don't you guys come on up? We have 16 students altogether, 4 from each class, who are elected to represent their class as liaison between the students and the administration, and also to talk about any school culture issues and to promote school spirit. This year so far, we've done that by promoting our Pride, Spirit, and Drive motto, which was developed.
Can I just interrupt quickly and have you all shift that way so that all the board members can see you? Thank you.
Our Pride, Spirit, and Drive motto, which was developed from the learner profile traits, we planned and executed homecoming week and dance, and most recently we've been working with Middlebury College students to create new sorting tables for the cafeteria, the recycling, compost, landfill tables. Now they have a video that they've put together that they're going to show you about the student perspective of MUHS, but before they do, I'm going to have them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Finn Fernandez. I'm the vice president, have been for this past year and the year before. I play football and I'm the captain of the lacrosse team. I am also a TA for a Spanish 2 class and cheerleader coordinator. And the one thing that I love the most about the school is the academic support that is provided in so many different ways, and especially from Tammy Beatty in the Learning Lab that everybody has access to.
I'm Janet McIntosh Barkdahl. I'm half of the president. We're missing Ezra Marks tonight. And I introduced these. So I'm sorry. I write creatively and I'm in Calliope. I'm also a peer leader coordinator. I'm in Scholars Bowl and Student Senate. And I think one of my favorite things about the school is that we are a smaller school, and so that in 600 students, you can really walk around the school and recognize almost every face. And even if you don't know everyone, you've usually seen them. And so in classes, as we're about to change the semester, we'll jump into classes, but it's pretty quick getting to know everyone.
Could you tell us what year you are, too?
Sorry, I'm a senior.
Thank you.
As well.
I'm Kenneth Barkdahl. I'm a sophomore. And I do student council. And I do a Carolina singing group and a men's ensemble singing group. I'm also part of Model UN. And I do Scholars Bowl and Ultimate Frisbee. And one of the things that I really like about the school is my ability to do activities before and after school when my friends aren't here, and then spend time with them during the day. And then be able to go home and do my work there and get enough sleep.
I'm Kate Wallace. I'm a junior. I'm the secretary of the student council. I'm the captain of the cross-country team in the fall. I also do Nordic skiing and track and field. And I'm a member of the band here. My favorite thing about MHS is probably the depth of the support that you can find through your teachers, and that they're always willing to help you out of class.
I'm Eileen Bosworth. I'm a junior. I do soccer and I Nordic ski, and I'm also on the track team, and I'm also in the band. And one of my favorite things about the school is that you can choose whichever class that you would like to take, and especially I really like the career center classes, and I really enjoyed taking this my freshman year, so that's really great.
I'm Anna Berg. I'm a freshman. I do choir, ballet. I did the fall musical, and I'm in Wallowing Generations Club. My favorite thing about NUHS is our foreign language program, and I really like the program we have here.
So we're going to share a video that we made just kind of talking about student activities, the curriculum, and the arts department.
Middlebury Union High School, the heart of Addison Central School District, located at the steps of the Green Mountains in the Champlain Valley. Home to less than 600 students, MUHS offers a variety of opportunities, both in and out of the classroom. Here's a sneak peek into student life at Middlebury Union High School. The English Department. English courses include Fundamentals of Language and Literature, Composition with Literature, Media and Speech, Individualized Reading and Writing, American Challenges, Popular Fiction, Art and Craft of Graphic Fiction, Real Life Writing, Digital Storytelling, American Literature, America in the World, World Literature, Western Heritage, Memoir, Journalism, Creative Writing, Poetry, and AP English. The Math Department. Math courses include Linear and Exponential Functions and Probability, Part 1 and 2, Algebra and Geometry, Geometry, Quadratic Functions in Linear Algebra, Quadratic Functions in Analytic Geometry, Analytic Geometry, Functions and Statistics, Functions in Trigonometry and Statistics, Trigonometry, Modeling and Limiting of Functioning, AP Statistics, AP Calculus 1 and 2. The Social Studies Department includes courses in World History 1, 2, and 3, America in the World, Practical Law, Cultural Anthropology, Economics, Genocide, Intro to Psychology, Religions of the Far East and the Near East, Public Issues and World Affairs, Vermont History, Agricultural Theory, Sports and Society, Herstory, AP US History, and AP World History. The Science Department. Science courses include Earth and Physical Science, Biology 1, Advanced Human Biology, Environmental Science, Chemistry 1, Chemistry 2, Physics, AP Biology, AP Environmental Science, AP Physics. The World Languages Department. World Languages courses include Latin 1, 2, 3, and 4, French 1, 2, 3, 4, and AP, Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4, AP, and Tertulia. The Fine Arts Department. Fine arts courses include band, jazz ensemble, string ensemble, concert choir, choral ensemble, piano, beginning guitar, intro to art, music theory and composition, music history, advanced art, cartooning, drawing, painting, sculpture, studio art, and woodshop 1, 2, and 3. Business education. Business education courses include personal finance, career exploration, entrepreneurship, sales and marketing, international business, tips course, internships, and work experience. Physical education courses include lifetime activities and personal fitness. Integrated skills courses include health, beginning foods, advanced foods, and driver education. Elective courses include Introduction to Computer Science, Python, and JavaScript, Senior Seminar, and Photography.
Soccer, sports,
I play hockey, lacrosse, I do the debate club, so I do a lot of community service, go to like CCD, which is like, I volunteer for CCD, which is like, I teach some kids about religion sometimes, but that's all I'm doing. I bring my lunch almost every day, so I usually eat, well, sometimes I eat like in the commons, sometimes in the library. Library doesn't like it, but
I think that all the teachers are very supportive and they're very kind to the kids.
pretty much everyone who goes to school here has known everyone since they were kindergarten, and so everybody knows each other.
The teachers are really kind and funny and they like to joke around with kids and everyone's just super supportive of each other and their parents.
It's a small school, but it has tons of opportunities. So we have a small school feel, but really it's many, many opportunities, choices, courses, sports, arts.
based on what they thought were some of the most exciting parts of America Ffa, led by Fed, so thank you, Fed. I think he has a future career in voiceovers. And they're willing to take any questions if anybody has questions for that.
Board members, any questions? Please.
So I'm curious, you touched a little bit about it in the video, but I'm curious about what your feelings are about the climate at the high school. I have heard that the high school can be somewhat cliquey, and I'm wondering, I mean, that's true of a lot of high schools, but do you feel that is more so or less so here? And how does the population as a whole deal with that kind of problem?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think that there is certainly that form of cliques occurring, which happens at a lot of large high schools and large populations, but also feel as if there are large communities for each and every kind of student to fit into. So it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world to be have kids a little bit separated and find their own group almost, but there certainly is that little bit of differentiation between students, but in no means is it detrimental or too detrimental towards the school.
Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
I think that sports teams really help people just get to know each other. I think that's something that's really great, is the environment when we're playing sports with other people and we make lots of friends.
Thanks. Chris, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just curious, when you guys were putting that together, did you guys learn anything about the school that surprised you? You might not have known about before you put it together.
Yes, Mary.
About student voices, do you feel like when you have suggestions or ideas that they're heard by people who can make it happen or help you make it happen, or do you feel that you have an input into how things go at school?
I think in terms of the events and activities and things that we organize as a student senate, we feel like we definitely have input into it, and we've been working hard this year, and we want to keep doing so, to ask the school community what they're looking for and what we can do to change Winter Carnival or to change homecoming, so that the whole student body is interested in the events that we're planning and putting on. And we're especially cognizant of those of us who are on Senate, and that we don't always necessarily reflect the entire student population. We've especially noticed that with our dress-up days. And so we've been, I think last year was our first year of putting out a survey of which dress-up day options do we want as a school, so that we could pick together. I think in terms of us taking what students ask for and what we're feeling and putting it towards the things that are beyond our control, that aren't the events we put on.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that a lot of, at least my friends and other people in school necessarily know that there's an outlet for their opinions when it comes to decisions made outside of student council, specifically student council's control.
Yes.
Thank you.
Steve?
In light of the issues that have surfaced in the country around Me Too and the relationships between boys and girls and women, how do you feel that's affected the student population, both from how the adults have addressed it and how the student body has addressed it? Sorry to get serious.
Big question.
Yeah, I tend to be around kids who are very passionate about the politics in the country and issues. And I would say that there are definitely teachers who they have said that they can go to and they can talk to, who are interested in it, and who have conversations about it. I've heard as well that our support system, just like Brooke Jetty and other people outside of just their teachers that they can go to, is good, and they're able to find outlets for any emotions they might have about that.
Great. Nick?
Are you excited about IB coming down the road?
How many of you are sophomores or freshmen? Because you're the ones who will really be part of this more so, yeah.
Yeah. I definitely, when I came into the school, had a pretty strict idea of exactly how I was going to, the classes I was going to take. And I don't know exactly how the whole transition to IB will go down, but I am, it's a little dark, but I definitely hope that I'll still have access to the courses that I want to take in terms of AP level or DP courses, because there are definitely many of those that I plan on taking.
Yeah, and we've talked about that within council as being sort of a liaison towards the school population, between talking to Mr. Lawson and other IB kind of specialists like Ms. Severy, where they're able to get the information across to us that may not be totally known by the rest of the student population about IB. So we are conscious, or some of us are conscious that are knowledgeable that we will have courses available, and there will be a transition period that will hopefully not affect schedules too much and will actually benefit students through DP program and the opportunities they can take from that.
Thank you. Yes, Jason.
Do you feel like the school policies and procedures as you understand them reflect your understanding of the school's, of the district's values and the values that you aspire to generally, or do you see that there are places where those aren't always in alignment?
Do you mean like the student handbook guidelines kind of thing?
Sure.
Or, okay.
It's a big question. It certainly is.
I mean, just real quick.
I mean, I don't know if this is a correct answer, but in general, I do feel like the school's policies do sort of reflect what we're, I don't want to say what we're told, but sort of the school's policies, I feel like, do reflect the sort of ideas that they want to express.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Yes.
So one of the things we've talked about at the school board is getting student voices at this table. And I talked to your advisor, Ms. Severy, and your fearless leaders about that this summer, and hopefully this board will move toward the ability to have 2 students on the board as non-voting members, but to give you more voice in the things that Jason was talking about, the policies, and in the things that the student senate or student council doesn't necessarily feel like they can control now. So beyond just sort of party planning, but to actually having a voice in the policies that we create. And I'm hoping that that happens sometime this year, so that next year we can have students sitting up here too and have your colleagues give us input into the work we're doing, including the budget. So that's hopefully in the works.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. I assume that's all. That's what all you had for us. Yeah, great. Well, that was a fabulous video, and we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is action on setting the tuition rate as required by state statute.
All right. I'm going to hand this off to Josh, who has documentation to share regarding how we get to a tuition rate.
So announced tuition is required by the legislature, and it basically is every district saying this is how much it's going to cost for someone to go to your school. which is then shared with all of the districts so they know what to budget for in the following year. They are aware that most of these announced tuitions are required to happen before budgets are passed. The statutory date is January 15th, which is Monday or Tuesday, I think. So they have protected school districts basically by saying if there's ever greater than a 3% discrepancy in the tuition rate that was announced versus the actual tuition rate, the state calculates the actual tuition rate by December 1st of the following year. So the tuition rate for FY18, for example, ours are in this one 16,000 and one is 17,800, I believe. At the end of this year, they do a big collection, and in December they announce what the actual allowable tuition is. And if that allowable number is different than what you were paying by greater than 3%, you can either get money back or you have to pay money. So that's how they protect it. To get this number, basically, we take all of the costs, K6, and divide it by all of the students. We include debt. We reduce it by any revenues we get. Revenues for K6, for example, is tuition that we get paid from schools that send students to our district, as well as the small schools grant, which is that $474,000 number. And then debt service is included, and so for K through 6, it's $16,152. On the back of the page is 7 to 12. The only offsetting revenue is tuition for students. Most of these are Hancock, Granville, and Rochester. And debt of 123, and that number is 18,542. Are there any questions on those tuition numbers?
So I'm sorry, the revenue is tuition that we're getting, and we use that to calculate the tuition.
Well, it reduces the revenue, it reduces that revenue from the expenses that we incur. So it subtracts the revenue from our total expenses.
Right.
And then calculates the.
But why are we calculating in tuition revenue in calculating tuition?
That's what the state legislatures decided.
Oh, boy, they're crazy up there. Yes, Chip.
Have these calculations changed? I mean, the numbers go up, obviously, but has the actual basis of it and what the legislature says you can do for that, has that changed over the years? Because this is what we do every year for 40 years.
There hasn't been any change in my time.
Okay.
Is there some rule about deviating from the state average? You know,
what?
well, do they say you can't set your tuition any higher than such a percentage from the state average of all the tuitions of all the public high schools?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, it's supposed to be based on your actual projected budget.
Okay.
That's how I've always understood it.
Yeah. And so next year, this is the tuition rate for next year.
Correct.
So when the students from those schools come here, they're paying that per student?
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, Ruth?
How many students are we currently budgeting for to come to us next year?
The total actual number of bodies is around 45, but a portion of those bodies go to Hannaford, so we only get, say a third or a half of some of those bodies. The total amount in the budget is $563,000.
Okay. And are they primarily from Hancock?
It's Hancock, Granville, Rochester, because they closed our high school this year. There's a couple other random ones.
But this does not include the students, I'm going to get this wrong, but the students, the 10 students or whatever bill that we.
School choice.
The school choice, it does not, they don't pay the tuition rate.
That's correct.
15.
15,
I believe.
okay.
Yeah.
And that is, that decision is coming, we still have to do that one, right?
Right.
For now, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, so we need a motion to set the tuition rate per the report we just received. Anybody want to say so moved?
Second.
Beautiful. Okay, all those in favor of the tuition rates before us, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? And we have set the tuition rate. All right, so now we are on to some budget talk, but this time we're going to hear from the Hannaford Career Center. Back when we had UD3, we would every year get a presentation from the Career Center, mostly so we understood the costs that we incur for the students that we send, plus the base rate for the Career Center. And Dana, if you'd like to give us a full introduction as to who you are and everything, that would be great.
Absolutely. Maybe Peter can help me by just connecting my points. Good evening. My name is Dana Peterson. I am the interim superintendent and director of the Hannaford Career Center. And my background is I've been a long-time educator in Vermont, both at the middle school and high school level. I've traveled and studied internationally, as well as research. And I'm here at the Career Center as a result of my interest in combining both the academic learning with the skill learning and the practical application. So I found the opportunity to...
Do you want to show everyone your password?
Excuse me? No, I can get that in pretty good. Plus, it's in French, so I think I'm okay. And that's true. Most of my passwords are French. That way I figure nobody's going to figure out what I make.
Redo.
Oops. I have to figure out how to type my password, apparently. That doesn't usually happen.
Maybe it was Russia.
Got it, okay. Voila. Très bien. Ça marche. Okay. Oops. So I did the introduction, so let me start here. Oh, you know what? I do have handouts. I apologize. I only have enough for the board, but if you'd like to take one and pass them along, you can at least take a couple of notes if you'd like. So the Career Center budget is very much like the budget that Josh just explained for the district, except it's not quite as complicated. And our total amount, and I'll get to that in just a second on the next page, but it's $3,468,524. And this shows the estimated tuition for FTE. So in terms of Josh's calculation with respect to students, and he talked about the partial students that come to us, we have an FTE, meaning the number of composite bodies that we put into our seats, and it's on a 6-semester trailing average. So when you pay for students attending the Career Center, you're actually paying for students that have already been there. It's a little weird, but once again, that's how those revenues are determined for us. Anyway, so up here, our estimated tuition for FY19 is $12,899, and last year's tuition was $11,926, which is a difference of $963, or an increase of 8.16%. Actually, yes. So if you look at the local assessments, that's what you pay. We also have state tuition from the state, which is $8,500, which brings it up to a grand total of $21,466. $12,899, almost $12,009, is assessed to the district, and the rest is paid by assessments from the general, the education fund to make up the difference. I thought I would put in a 7-year historical comparison. I did this for our school board. Was that just last night? I sent in my board report. So I wanted to let people know what our proposed budget is and how it compares to previous years. So the $3,468,524 is this year's, and that's 0.4% below what last year's budget was. It happens to be the lowest budget in the last 7 years, and only $18,000 above the budget 10 years ago. That's not on the slide, but just for historical perspective. So you can see that over the last several years, budgets have fluctuated, but this year's budget, compared to historical budgets, is the lowest. Just so that you know that we spent a good bit of time going through the budget to find savings to pass on to our sending schools. The historical tuition I decided would be important for people to see as well. So on the per pupil cost, that's the total per pupil cost, is $21,466. That's up 6.47% because of the state aid. So although the assessed tuition is up 8.1, the total cost for students is up 6.4. And on the right-hand column, you have our 6th semester FTE average. And you can see that historically, the numbers back in 2012-13 are significantly higher by about 33 from where they are now. And that is what actually results in the per pupil cost. It's the total cost of the programming divided by your FTE.
That's total students, not just Middlebury Union High School students, right?
Total, yes, but and then you get assessed on your percentage of the students. I can't remember what next year's is. It's somewhere in the 50 range, 54, 53?
45.09.
45.09, okay. So I'm a little dyslexic. It's the reverse. Anyway, the capacity and fixed costs. So the Career Center programs are singular. In other words, when we have instructors, they are teaching, they are the program. So we don't have multiple sections of various programs. The instructors may do pre-tech and may do technical programs, but that's the whole program. So if we cut instructors, or if we eliminate instructors, we then eliminate the programs and the opportunities in those areas for students. And our mission, as directed by both ARE and our board, is to provide those opportunities for career college readiness and pathways. So we have to really look at very carefully whether the programs can be phased in, phased out, and how we would add new ones or new opportunities for students. This year, given the fact that I've only been here on the job for 6 months, it was very difficult for me to be able to assess in any great degree whether programs should be eliminated now or not. In talking with my colleagues across the state, the Tech Directors Association, it was clear that we needed to be able to assess that on a grander time scale than what we got for this budget. So what is important is to know that we currently have approximately 30% capacity that we could use, and that would cost the sending schools nothing to participate in those programs at this point in time, because it fluctuates on a 6 semester average, and that would be amortized over several semesters. So we have capacity, and we'd be really happy to be able to place more students and give more opportunities for them to participate in these programs and program outcomes. So for those people who are visual, I decided I would just throw up a pie chart, and I don't know if you can read the numbers, but 1 is the blue, 2 is orange, and 3 is gray. And I have high school 1, high school 2, high school 3. And it's just, these are theoretical numbers. So if you have a $10,000 cost, and you have 40 students out of 100, so you have 40% represented by the blue, then you would pay $250 per student. The other 2 schools with 30 students each would pay $333.30 with rounding. Anyway, if those students were increased by, say, 10% each, and still within our capacity, you would have costs that drop per pupil cost to $227.27, 303, and so 303. And so that's the way our budget fluctuates based on students we have had in the past. So we can actually accommodate and service more students now in the current year and for next year before that would actually come to the taxpayers to actually put the bill. Opportunities to collaborate. I just mentioned that we have additional capacity and would love to serve more students. We are currently working collaboratively with our sending schools to coordinate on proficiency attainment, and we are exploring the option to offer CP within the IB framework with our colleagues here at the high school, and we're having conversations both at the administrative level and the teacher level on a variety of ways to collaborate and serve students collectively. I have an invitation that I'd like to offer to everybody. I was kind of prompted to say that we need to increase awareness for what our programs have to offer and what they have to offer for kids. So on February 15th, from 4 to 8 p.m., we have our annual open house. This year, we are actually putting a spin on our open house, and we are combining it with a maker fair. So we have coordinated with members from AOE and area makers to actually have them come in and show how their opportunities for making and creating dovetail with the programs that we have. Students will be doing demonstrations, but there will also be demonstrations from the maker community. And we're hoping to generate a little bit more interest and understanding about what we offer for opportunities to students at the Career Center. And we do have both of our campuses operating. So I was asked by my staff to make sure that I put in a public service announcement for our open house. So now this is the end of my slideshow presentation. I'll take questions in just a moment, but my prompt is to remind me that I have a video that I'm supposed to show. So I'm going to see if I can get this to work. And it's less than 2 minutes. This is a promotional video that was put together with student input. Oh, never mind. Hang on. I got it. Give me a second. It always happens for some reason. It thinks it knows what I want to do on my screen.
Dana,
yep.
If you want the sound, take that little green plug and plug it in your headphone jack. There's a green plug in the computer.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay, so I just have to check this. Practiced it all afternoon. I didn't want it to extend. It always extends, so I want to just duplicate this displays. And now I have to apply it. And make sure that I keep the changes. Otherwise, it's going to go revert back, which I don't want it to do. And now, I think we're good. I just got to pull this back from the beginning. And away we go.
To the shop, to the field, to the studio, to the classroom, to the community. Wherever you want to go, chart a course for the future that starts at the Hanford Career Center. At Hanford Career Center, you'll learn the skills you need for long-term success in your career, college, and beyond. Not sure if the Career Center is right for you? Think again. With so many opportunities, all you need is to find the one that's right for you. Get in touch today, because if you're thinking about your future, you're already thinking Hannaford Career Center.
Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I would be happy to try to entertain them, but I'm thinking about my temper.
Question's going to come over from this side. So,
To the side.
yeah. Questions, board members? Yes, Mary?
Does this include your evening courses as well? Because it used to be that there were a number of evening courses that were offered to
Adult ed.
adult ed.
Yes, we still have a very
So it's
active
still
adult
in your
ed.
same, it's in the same budget?
Uh,
Or is that a
That's a separate budget, and it doesn't go in for tax purposes. So it's self-sustaining. So the adult ed program is run on tuitions, grants, and that's about it. And all of that comes in to usually take care of it's self-sustaining, take care of the program itself. I think it's somewhere in the $100,000 range to operate that program. I don't have the statistics this year. Isn't that what we saw last night? About 100? 109?
Yeah, it was
pretty close. Thanks. Sorry. Yes.
Ruth?
So the total budget is of this
$3,468,524.
3.4 million, and how many students in total? What was the FTE students?
The FTE students is 127. The total number of students that we serve is far greater than that.
And how many of them are from here? What proportion is the Middlebury ACSD portion?
42, 43%, approximately.
Okay.
The tuition rates that you went through,
Yes.
as I recollect, is there also an additional base payment that's made?
That's what adds up, the
That's included.
$12,899
Okay.
plus the 12,008 plus the 8,500 approximately is the state's contribution to offset the cost of technical education.
All right, so the total cost per student was, I think,
21,466.
And then, but the actual tuition paid by Middlebury Union High School is?
12,000, well, for next year projected,
Yeah.
12,899.
Per student.
This year it's 11,926, I think.
Jason?
And all of that's proportional, right?
Yes.
Most students aren't full-time at Career Center.
That's correct. So the number of students that we serve, it's somewhere around 280 this semester, and it's comparable for next semester. So total number of students served over the course of the 2 semesters is around just shy of 600. But they're not, that's why it's not a full-time, because it's broken down
And
by semester.
what's common in terms of the number of programs that a given student will be engaged with at the Career Center?
I don't. It does vary because they can start as freshmen. We have some students who go and take courses at our center for all 4 years. Some of them even try to do an overload and come down during free blocks to do some independent study work. But what is common, it would be a shot in the dark, that the students take probably. Students who come as tech would probably come back and take a program, a technical program. So at least 2. The students who take Career Center programs are probably at least 2. There are some that just come down for a single class because it fits into their schedule wherever they happen to be along the continuum from 9th grade through 12th grade, because the pre-tech programs are accessible to anybody. It doesn't matter what grade you're in. The technical programs are designed mostly for juniors and seniors, and are more substantial and take a lot more time to actually complete the credentials. But you can have sophomores that, if they're appropriate, to access the program.
Could you remind us what programs are on this campus and what programs are on the North Campus?
The North Campus is the diesel and the automotive program. Here we have medical professions. We have architecture and engineering. You saw them designing boats and actually putting them out in the water. They actually designed their own boats, and with the exception of a couple of little caulking errors, they were good to go and all were seaworthy. We also have industrial design. We have the Addison Repertory Theater. We have
Culinary.
Culinary, yep, thank you. I said medical professions. We have human services. We also have ag mechanics. We have sustainable agriculture, and one other, I'm drawing a blank on the ag program. Natural resources, thank you. And I think we have 12 or 14. I hope I caught everything. And we also have a pretty valuable support service with our instructional support to make sure that students have access to the programming and get the support that they need to be successful in their programs.
Jen.
How are students made aware of these opportunities, and at which schools or in which towns are they made aware of these opportunities?
So historically, there have been presentations at all of the schools, and we did that back in September.
Like all the schools where?
Middlebury, Virgins, and Mount A. Those are our core sending schools. We also have some other schools that send based on lack of programming available elsewhere, Fairhaven, Otter Valley. We communicate with them, and if they want us to come for a presentation, we will, but we send them information that they can share with their students. And so that goes out via email to all of the offices that we serve. This year, we also have visits to the Career Center. So Middlebury, Virgins, and Mount Abe have already come for students. Yep, 10th graders. Yep. All 10th graders have a visit. We have a middle school visit from moms coming up. I think it's next week. Don't quote me on that. Our schedule's a little blurry at this point. And we will be reaching out to Mount Abe and Virgins as well to invite them to come and visit the program.
Right. Just a couple more, because we are on a bit of a tight agenda here. Suzanne.
What are the technical leadership programs that are offered through the Tech Center?
Oh, that's a good question. We have Future Farmers of America, FFA, and we have BACA. I can't remember what the acronym stands for. But there are two branches of leadership that students can participate in, and they are very active, and we've had great success, both competing at the local level and at the national level. We had several people placed at a competition, a leadership competition in Indianapolis, both as a team and as individuals.
Jason?
Are there areas that you see where there are common challenges that students face who might want to take advantage of your programs coming from this district that could be opportunities to better integrate the curriculum between the high school and the Career Center?
I think there are opportunities. It would be difficult for me. I don't know the curriculum here that well to be able to say what those are. But I think that both here and in the other sending schools, that there are opportunities to actually work collaboratively and perhaps realize some efficiencies and sharing of both curricula as well as perhaps even staff in the future. I would be excited to talk to folks about how that might play out.
Mary, last question?
Ours already asked.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Dana. We appreciate it, and good luck as you continue through your first year.
Thanks very much. Have a great night.
Thank you. All right. Well, as we change over from one budget to another, our next topic will be our continued discussion of our proposed FY19 budget draft. We've all been provided with the voluminous budget book with all the detail. And okay, learn a little bit more about it. Who's kicking us off?
Do you want to go through the process?
Oh, yeah, and so for those of you in the audience, we're going to get some new and updated information, a little more detailed information. At that point, I will go to the board for clarifying questions, and then if folks in the audience have a clarifying question, we'll do that, and then open it up to comments. And I just want to say, we're not, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not taking action on adopting the budget tonight. That will be at our next meeting, which will be January 22nd. A clarifying question in the back there?
Last meeting there, you said there could be hard copies here tonight for us, the people to look at, and that's where I was.
I have copies of the overview. The entire budget book is 70-some pages, so I didn't feel like that was wise to copy the whole thing. I have a few copies that I could pass around.
Is it online?
It's online.
It is online.
Yeah. It's online. It's on our website. But if you have a smart device, this is. So I've got 3 copies of this as well. Pass if you don't have a smartphone.
That's probably yours from last time.
This is my dongle. I've been looking for this.
Yeah. It was in the computer.
Peter, would you mind clipping that on so that?
Okay, while it's loading and deciding if it wants to present itself, I'm going to talk a little bit just about kind of where we are. So if you haven't been at any meetings and don't really know what's been happening, I'm going to just kind of give a quick overview. I'm going to pass it off to Josh. Josh is going to go over some of the updates from our last meeting on the 18th of December to today. I'm going to be here, so my back's not to all of you. And then I will probably talk a little bit more, and then we're going to have a number of our central office budget departments talk about their budgets and any changes that are happening from last year to this year. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing, and it looks like this is not going to load. There we go. Okay. So I think everyone knows that this year has been an unusual year, and not just in ACSD, as we tackle really kind of our first unified budget where we're not carrying over all of the individual budgets we had, but at the state level, with a lot of unknowns about where things are headed, and continued pressure on K-12 funding that we have to respond to. Equally, part of what is part of our local reality is our enrollment, and a decline in enrollment that we're seeing over the next 5 or 6 years, which we hope is leveling off after that point. We are losing 50 students out of the high school, the senior class, going into next year. That is a bubble that's been going through our system. All of this information is in the budget book, so if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I would really urge you to go online and take a look at it. I'm not sure how good it looks on phones. How is it on a small screen? Is it adapting at all, or? I gave up. You gave up, okay. Okay. So we will.
If you want a good view of this, there's plenty of seats up here on the side.
So I will work on that between now and our next meeting to make it mobile friendly. But the budget book does have information in terms of context, the process, our budgeting process, and some of the decision making that went into presenting this draft to the board today. The budget book is still a working draft, so it's not complete yet. We will be, after this meeting, going back. We have been updating that with current numbers, et cetera, so that is a work in progress until the board approves the budget. This year was also the formation of the ACSD Finance Committee. The Finance Committee gave us direction on the 11th of December and work throughout the fall with us, with Josh and with me, in helping to create an outline, which then went into this first draft of the complete budget. The budget outlines were presented in December, and the budget book is our first budget. So what you're seeing here is our first real budget in terms of having all of our numbers, rolling up all the numbers. There were some changes, and as I mentioned, Josh is going to now talk a little bit about some of those changes from the 18th to today. Right now. There you go. Thank you.
So first thing, I just want to quickly go over the budget book. For those of you who have heard it before. The first section is introductory. It's got a number of got an executive summary that is very short. So we don't go through all 72 pages. I was suggesting that. Then it gets into the financial section where it has information that was handed out, and then goes in further detail. The first expanded detail piece is actually organized by function code, so it really goes through and combines all of our schools together. I put that in the front this year because at some point, I do hope in the next couple of years we can stop talking about individual schools and just start talking all of them. Services or whatever it is. So after that, it does break down every school by their cost. This year we created a curriculum budget. And that was both to identify IB coordinators that previously were just sort of housed in various places, as well as curriculum funds. So there's the summer curriculum writing program or grant funds that we have. So trying to pull those out of PD, which is where they were previously housed, and put them there. So it's just shifting money around. It's not adding any money. Then after that, there is an informational section that just has lots of data and ratios and statistics and all kinds of good stuff like that. So budget drivers, there's a budget driver discussion in the introductory section. As Peter said, declining enrollment is one of the drivers this year. The state ed fund deficit of $94.5 million projected is a driver, and is all the pressure from the state is based on that. Our salary and payroll increases, those are just standard, mostly contractual, of $648,000. Healthcare, and that really talks about some healthcare savings that we're going to realize next year with the new healthcare plans that are coming out, as well as some risks that we have with the HRA plans where we'll get money back for what's not spent, but we really don't have a good idea of what is going to be spent. So we're addressing that with some fund balance from this past year in a reserve fund. That's the proposal at least. FY16 fund balance usage, we used about $791,000 last year to offset taxes. So that was a number we needed to make up. And then federal grants and the volatility of those and whether or not we're going to receive them really doesn't even come out until June, May or June. So those are out there, and how we're going to respond when those things actually occur is something that we're addressing in this as well.
So what I tried to do, so what we've done, and last night another iteration was posted to our website, so these numbers have changed a little bit from the one that went out on the 5th, is I looked at our framework, which we looked at on the 18th, which compared an FY18 to an FY19 proposed, and compared that to the budget that we actually produced. So as Peter said, the budget that we produced is different from the framework because it actually looks at every single line that we have and rolls up all of those costs and includes what I'll call the smaller costs. So if, for example, in one school, if PT services were budgeted for $400 in this current year and they've actually already spent $1,500 this year, I bumped that budget up to $1,500 after discussion with the principal to say, hey, is this a one-time thing or is this something that we should be budgeting for next year? So there's lots of little changes everywhere. And we wanted to account for those because those are real costs and I don't want to under budget. I don't want to under budget. There are some major differences. So if you look at the budget framework under student instruction, and this is a little confusing, I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. We were expecting a savings of $922,000. In our actual budget, student instruction, which is considered both student instruction on the sheet you have in front of you, and special education, those make up student instruction. Those actual numbers result in a savings of $333,000, not $922. That's a difference of $588. There are 4 real major drivers of that $588,000. The first one are CSAC expenses. Not an increase in expenses, but an actual increase of services that we are receiving right now from CSAC that we expect to still need next year based on our students. That is approximately $168,000. The second piece is support staff healthcare compensation. In the agreement with the support staff, there was compensation provided directly in their wages for the increase of their healthcare costs. And so that number is included now, was not included in that budget framework just because I forgot about it, basically. Early retirement, and that number is $50,000. Early retirements. So in the original numbers, back in the framework, we were expecting 3 early retirements that we were not going to replace in our rural elementary schools. We've only received actually 1 elementary retirement in general from an actual teacher of a classroom. We have some special ed and some grant funded positions. So those 2 positions that are now just going to be reduced, that's a difference of $85,000 each, so that's $168,000 or $70,000. There's also a grant funded position that is 50% grant funded, so those savings are actually instead of hitting our general fund, that student instruction line, actually hit our grant funding line, and so there's really no savings to our general fund. That's $30,000. And then special education positions, we've had a couple special educators retire, and as we looked at where we actually hire special educators and talking with Vicki on the qualifications that we request, instead of a $55,000 additional cost, we expect them to be a little closer to $70,000. So that's an add of about $30,000. So that's the third. And then the last piece is just general special education expenses based on our actual student population, or an increase over last year of $108,000. So if you add those 4 things together, that comes to about $560,000. And we are trying to get to 588. We're explaining 588, and that's close enough given all the other things that get rolled in. So, with all that said, total expenditures, which is on your page, $38,359,000. Total revenues, $7,442,000, gives us a local education spending of $30,917,000. Our equalized pupils are 1,824.28. That gives us that ed cost of $16,947. And when you do the math, that gives us a district-wide tax rate of 1.6420. That's an increase over our district-wide tax rate last year of 4.76 cents. This is some quick numbers I pulled together for historical tax rates. These are pre-CLA tax rates. Once you get into CLA, numbers go every different direction. For example, Middlebury CLA decreased another 3% this year, which jacked up their tax rate again. So Middlebury CLA is now in the 84% range. And so what the CLA does, which is the common level of appraisal, it's a state number that they say, okay, Middlebury, you are valuing all of your property at X. We think the value of your property is Y, and that difference is a percentage. And so if Middlebury's is 84%, they think that we are undervaluing our property by 16%. And so we have to take that tax rate of 1.64 and divide it by 84%, which in turn makes Middlebury's projected tax rate 1.93. Some towns have property that is overvalued according to the state and have a CLA that's like 108, for example. And so their tax rate is going to be less than 1.64. So that's what the state does to basically equalize all property taxes, so no municipalities are playing with property values in order to subvert taxes. So that's that. I just wanted to also then quickly talk about our fund balance recommendation. Our fund balance for FY17 is $1.5 million. Healthcare reserve fund, we're proposing to put $200,000 into a healthcare reserve fund. Right now, we are budgeting 60% of our HRA expenses in our current budget, in that $30,917,000 number. So what that means is we are liable, or we are at risk for 88% of the total HRA amount. Our employees that have HRAs are responsible for the first 12%. So we're only budgeting 60% of that 88% that we're liable for. So there's no information, we have no data on what that number is going to be. So we thought that it was a good idea to take half of that risk, so another 20%, and move that into a healthcare reserve. So at the end of the year, or end of next year, if it did in fact be 75% that our employees used, then we would be covered there. So we wouldn't have that risk. If it's 95%, then that extra 15% will just have to come out of the general fund as a deficit, basically. Capital Reserve Fund, we're moving $823,000 into Capital Reserve. That is to go to really capital projects, and Bruce is going to get into that a little bit later. And then $500,000 to the Education Reserve Fund. Right now there's about $318,000 in that Ed Reserve Fund, and that's made up of, I think there were 3 or 4 schools that had money left in their Ed Reserve that were consolidated into ACSD. And the Finance Committee, and we've all talked quite a bit about having a certain reserve and what that right number is. After talking to both our auditor, and then I think some people have reached out to other municipalities, in the municipality level and school-based level, that number is often 5 to 10% of your local education cost. We right now have 318,000 is 1%. So we're moving 500,000, and originally this number was 300,000 to get to 2%. We bumped it up 200,000 more because 2 of the early retirements that have been accepted are taking what's called option A, which means that they need to have payments made to the Vermont Teacher Retirement System in this current fiscal year, and that's at $60,000 a piece. So that's $120,000. There are also 2 other potential option A retirements that are out there, and so if those come in, then we'll have to pay out another $120,000. So we thought it was a good idea. We'll move 200,000 in because we don't know what's going to happen with those early retirements, and that will protect us, or at least offset most of our risk if that happens. So that's the proposed for the fund balance. And next is Peter. You talking about this? Like that?
So this is unchanged from our last meeting. Our current budget has a reduction of 3.2 elementary licensed positions, 3 MUMS licensed positions, 4 MUHS licensed positions, 8 support staff positions, and a 0.5 central office staff position. We had a lot of questions about school costs in our last meeting, and just to be clear, it's impossible for us, given unification, to get back to the way that we used to assess individual school costs. So this, as you can see, these numbers are not our equalized pupil costs. These numbers are simply a way to show you a comparison of cost per pupil by school using our cost center information in the budget book along with the facilities costs. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And so you can see here's a rural average, and then the cost per school, cost at Mary Hogan, at MUMS, and MUHS, it says not in count Career Center FTE. So the Career Center counts the number of our high school students as in their count. So we can't count them as well. Okay, Vicki.
Yes, I don't need it.
Okay.
I think Caitlin, I'll set up. So, and I apologize at the bottom one, you can't really see. So I wanted to just kind of look forward to some shifts on the horizon for next year and beyond. And the biggest is in terms of a shift in leadership model, which is in the budget. And we're moving from an associate director and an early ed director to an elementary and a secondary building-based special ed coordinator. And those positions are school year plus a few day positions that are going to be embedded in each building. So we will have a secondary coordinator will be a couple of days a week at the middle school and a few days a week at the high school, and the elementary position will be shared across the 7 elementary schools. The idea of the embedded building-based support is to provide additional on-site support and coordination basically of student services, and really taking a look at and being supportive to special educators and others who are implementing practices and consistency of practices across the board. So that's going to be a pretty big shift. Our second shift is in our early ed program, and the early ed program is a combination of on-site and outreach. We have right now 2 classrooms that are housed at Mary Hogan Elementary School that are run by the early ed staff. And then we also have early ed staff who provide services in other programs such as Salisbury, Bridport, Ripton, as well as community-based programs such as Mary Johnson, Otter Creek. What we are switching there is that the early ed classrooms that are currently housed at Mary Hogan will stay at Mary Hogan, but they will be under the umbrella of Mary Hogan School. So we are doing a split programming there, which allows us more slots for pre-K students to come in, both 3 and 4-year-olds. And then we'll be still providing services within the Mary Hogan program and also outreach, but the shift in ownership and under the umbrella is going to turn to Mary Hogan. And so they will be part of the Mary Hogan staff. The third piece that you can't see on here is a shifting in some of our practices, and that a lot of that is going to be based on, and the admin team is going to be working on looking at the district management group report, taking a look at the recommendations that were provided in that report, and what opportunities we can move forward with. And as we move those practices forward, one of the pieces that you will see in the budget is there's additional money in the school psychology portion of the budget, and what we would like to do is increase the number of school psychologists that we have available in the schools to help support our shifts in practice as we move forward. So those are the big pieces under special ed moving ahead.
So Josh already mentioned the curriculum budget, which looks like it's something brand new, but actually is just a reorganization of money that we have spent in the past to represent our collective efforts in moving forward. The curriculum leaders, who double in several cases as IB coordinators, are in buildings, but we've represented them in a centralized budget line. Teacher leader stipends were in the professional development budget this year, and we've moved them into the curriculum budget for next year because they represent an investment in our collective curriculum efforts. That's largely what the decrease in the PD budget is from. It's a moving of funds, not an actual elimination of them. And then we also have, last summer we had $20,000 in curriculum writing grants, and the board directed us at the last meeting to increase that to support teachers in their additional work this coming summer and through next year, to do a lot of writing of new curriculum as we move toward IB. So we're really investing heavily in supporting our teachers in making that shift. So that's what that fund is. The professional development fund then, in very broad strokes, includes course reimbursement. Last year we budgeted $105,000 for course reimbursement to meet teachers' master agreement allowances. Halfway through the year, we're halfway through that budget, and so we've decided to do the same for next year. This covers our IB consultants and fees. The fees that we pay cover the consultants who are working with our schools to help us through the authorization process, and district level professional development.
Facilities. So this past year we had an assessment done of all of our facilities by an independent firm, and they recommended that we invest $21 million in our schools district-wide to bring everything up to date, which was eye-opening. So what we've done is, on our capital projects list, we have picked some of the most urgent needs, which still total up to a little over $1 million. And that list is included with the budget book, right? And hopefully we'll get through the majority of those this round. And then we are working on a long-range capital plan to address as many as we can of the other deficiencies that were identified. That some of the deficiencies we can live with and continue to function without any problems, and there are others that just really need to be looked at, and some systems just need to get replaced that most people don't ever think of. And part of that is because many of the buildings in this district were built in the 50s and 60s, and some things just don't survive that well over that amount of time. So that's what we're looking at for facilities.
So throughout the fall, we created a digital learning plan.
Probably, Will, you haven't been before us too long.
Yeah, my name is Will Hatch. Yeah, I'm Will Hatch. I'm the technology director for ACSD. I started in May this past year. So the digital learning plan was created throughout the fall, and it's going to be kind of our roadmap for the next three to 5 years. It's a 3-year plan. It talks about pedagogy, infrastructure, professional development. It's on the school the ACSD website. Everybody should take a look at it. It's a fairly detailed document, so we won't get into it too much here, but it talks basically about what we're going to be teaching the kids and what kinds of tools we're going to be using to do that. There's an element to it that talks about purchasing, replacement of equipment, and how we're going to provide support, which is an important component of the whole thing, so we can get the proper tools out there for teachers to use and for students to use. As far as budget goes, we have been and we will be continuing to deal with a lot of deferred maintenance. We have a pretty aging infrastructure of projection devices and computers that we're trying to catch up on and replace, so we have good current modern functional technology for people to use. And that can include switching, cabling, firewalls, document cameras. It's a pretty large selection of equipment. What we're aiming for is to standardize things and to have a replacement cycle so we can proactively have the right equipment for people to use. I'd like to get away from the sort of what's always has happened in schools where you just use things until they die. And I'd like to actually be out in front on that and keep things for a certain period of time and then properly dispose of them, however that may be. We're going to be moving a lot of systems to the cloud whenever we have an opportunity. So for example, our student information system, PowerSchool, I'm looking to get that hosted off-site for security purposes, so we don't have to maintain equipment to have it locally. And there's lots of other systems that will also be moving off-site whenever we have the opportunity. Bandwidth is something that we really need to address, where they recommend 1.5 megabits per second per student, and we're at like 0.3 district-wide, and a lot of that has to do with what we have available for internet providers. Ultimately, we'd like to get to a one provider solution where we have one internet provider, we have a wide area network, and we have one internet pipe that comes into the district and feeds all of the schools. But the problem with that is getting fiber optic cable to some of the rural buildings. So that's something that we'll be working on. Wireless infrastructure is going to be really important in the future with mobile devices. So for example, in the high school and the middle school, all the wireless access points are 5 or 6 years old. They're not capable of the latest technology with wireless, so we'll probably be replacing those over the summer. We're actually piloting a different type of access point in Cornwall right now to see how they work out. And if they do work out over the next few months, that's probably the direction we'll go. And we're trying to have an equitable amount of devices for students. Some schools had more devices than they had students. Some have half as many devices as they have students. So we're moving things around. We just made a Chromebook purchase recently that we're in the process of rolling out. And ideally, we'll be replacing, say, 20% of our computers per year. And that will total somewhere around 500 devices. They may be refurbished, they may be new, be a combination of both. But if you had, I think in the equipment line item, there's about $250,000, and if you had 500 computers that were $500 a piece, that would eat that whole line item up. So we get donations sometimes, which helps a lot. And Chromebooks are pretty inexpensive. They're about $185 a piece. So.
I think this is the last slide.
All right, we'll open the floor to questions from board members before we open it to the big floor. Yes.
Vicki, I had a question. The staffing, titling change thing. Are the people in those current positions going to be taking over the new things that are going to be at the schools, or are these additional people that you're going to be having?
They're not additional, they're just a shift.
Okay.
Yep.
Further questions? Folks, if you have informational questions that you'd like to ask, be a good time. Yes, please tell us who you are and where you're from.
I'm Colleen Rinkus, teach math at the high school. This is for Bruce. I'm wondering if there's a breakdown of the $21 million capital projects that are needed by school.
There is. There's a 150-page plus report that is on our website that you can access that goes through in detail, school by school, the deficiencies.
Radiator by radiator. That's right. Yes.
My name is Monica. I have a child at Mary Hogan. And I have a question for Vicki. I'm wondering, with the new shift, are there still going to be places for the kids that really need to be separated out of the classroom? There's still going to be places for those young people to go and get taught separately from their class?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We're not, what we're looking at is a shift in ensuring that
Anybody else with a question? Yes, would you mind just tell us your name and where you're from?
I'm Mike Corbett, I'm from Millbury.
Oh, you go ahead and stand, that'd be great.
I had the budget book, and then I had this that got circulated, and I just had a couple of questions about fiscal year 19 and how it reconciles to this. It looks like, I couldn't really follow Josh and all the last minute changes, but it looks like the per pupil spending is down relative to what was in the budget book, is that correct?
Yeah, so that
16,947 from 17,145.
So it has changed since the issuance of the 5th, and yes, it changed by, it was reduced by $300 and some odd $1,000.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the equalized pupil threshold, I know what the state spending threshold is, what's the equalized pupil threshold?
So that's basically a figure that boards have always asked for, and what that is the ed spending per equalized pupil of 16,947 minus our eligible deductions. And so what that's telling us is we have, it's giving us the number that we have that we could actually, the state spending threshold is 17,816, equalized pupil threshold of 16,765 is saying that we could spend another $1,050 plus or minus before we hit that threshold. So it's pulling the eligible deductions out of our ed spending per pupil cost. Because we can overspend the state spending threshold by the amount of our eligible deductions without being double taxed.
So Michael, you could be on the finance committee because we just discussed this at length. The eligible deductions, there are certain categories that the state lets us take out of our per pupil spending to calculate the threshold. So it's debt service, some special ed costs, and what's the third one?
Payments to Vermont's teacher retirement.
So teacher retirement payments. So that's just the taking out those deductions to get the net per threshold number.
Okay. And then last year, when we had a fund balance, there was a lot of discussion about what created that fund balance. And I didn't see that in anything up to this point. So why do we have such a big fund balance? What did we miss the mark on last year that we have extra money to fund reserves with, or am I not following that?
Well, last year we had a $1.2 million fund balance. This year we have 1.5. That's just the way it was budgeted, I guess I would.
So
this fund balance is prior. This fund balance is prior to us making changes to the unified budget to take out places where there were discrepancies and where that fund balance was being generated, essentially. So you won't see next year our prediction and looking at how much we're spending this year and how things are matching. We're looking kind of even, maybe not, maybe a little bit in the negative. We're not sure yet, but we're a lot closer to actual now than we were before.
So the fund balance.
Surplus that we discussed.
No, the fund balance is from FY17. So that was the last year when each of the school districts had individual budgets and had individual budgeting practices. And many of those budgets were, had accumulated over the years and therefore created fund balances. So last year when we put together this current year's budget, the FY18 budget, we went through line by line to really kind of equalize those budgets, and then we've done it again. Josh has gone through them again this year. So the thought is that in the future our budgets are much more accurate to what we expect to spend, whereas in the past they were probably a little added on.
The only other thing I had was to ask if maybe this PowerPoint can make it on the website if it's not already. Sometimes in the past, some of these interim presentations don't make it up there. Just a reference related.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruth, would you take a moment and just tell us the Finance Committee met today and just sort of your takeaways from where we are?
So the Finance Committee met just before this meeting, and we looked at the most recent version of this budget book, which was from yesterday afternoon. So we're always really looking at the freshest information, and it's still a moving target, although the target is, the movement is slowing. I think we're getting closer and closer to what we hope is a final version. So we just went through what Josh and Peter and everybody presented here tonight, but then we looked at some line-by-line things in some of the individual school budgets, and had some questions for them about individual line item budgets, and then talked about the process going forward. I think the Finance Committee will meet at least one more time before our next meeting. And we have a goal of getting a unanimous vote on this budget. So we really want to make sure that people on the board feel comfortable and really feel like they can support the budget. So that's pretty much where we're at, and I can answer questions from anybody. Anyone has them.
Not just clarifying questions anymore, just
Yeah.
like overall questions.
We got further questions from the board? Yes, Jen?
I think Peter Burrows mentioned, or Josh mentioned, meeting with principals to kind of go through, expenses from last year and moving forward to this year's budget. Can you expand upon how principals are feeling about their individual budgets? Are they feeling like they have the resources they need to be successful? Or is there areas where we may need to reevaluate some of the budget items?
That's a complex question,
Okay.
I think. Because we're right now going through the first budget where we're making changes to individual schools and to staffing. And, I think I mentioned this previously, I don't think any principal sitting here is going to say that they don't need an additional X, Y, or Z. I mean, I think part of going through this process of looking at the ratios and trying to determine need and kind of work within our means as we look at the cliff that's coming is having to make decisions that we might not necessarily want to make, but we feel in trying to be equitable across all of our schools make the most sense. So I think every building probably has, and I would include the central office in that too, has different kinds of positions that would be great to add, that would be helpful. But I think my feeling based on where we've gotten to now is I think we can work with what we have, and I think principals feel we can work with what we have and where we're going with this budget. That's a long way of saying a lot and a little.
Thanks. So I would open it up to comments from anybody who wishes to make them. Otherwise, as I said, this budget will be taken back up again on the 22nd when we meet on the 22nd. But yes, please tell us your name and where you're from.
Heidi, welcome. I have 2 kids at America Ffa. This is a technology question. I was just wondering what factors you guys use to determine that a cloud-based service is more secure.
Great question.
And what were we doing prior?
Well, we currently host our own student information system. We have a server here at the high school that it's secure. We have a high-end firewall that protects the building. We have to actually maintain a couple of test servers for to test updates and upgrades just to make sure that they go well. We spend kind of a disproportionate amount of time taking care of those servers. And a company like Pearson, who owns Power School, has teams of engineers that handle the upgrades and the updates and the maintenance of the equipment and the security of it as well. So it's not super expensive. It's about $7,500 per year, but I feel that it's a good move to go that direction. And it's actually a pretty common thing. Hosting your own student information system is becoming less common.
All right. Well, yes. Please, Perry.
I'm Perry Lessing. I'm a town and I teacher at high school.
just looking over the packet very quickly that came out, a couple of questions come up. The student spending per year is down $268 per year, if I'm understanding that correctly. They equalized the expenditures per student from last year to this year. This current proposal is down $268 per person. And if I understand it correctly from what you were saying a moment ago, there's another $182 of deductions that we've taken away from the state limits.
Yep.
That are in addition to that. And if you multiply that out by how many students we have, that's $500,000 or $800,000, depending on whether or not you count that extra $182 we were talking about. As we're talking about the budget having to be reduced and having to make these cuts in services to students or services to the school, there's this kind of mood that it's inevitable and that it's a shame, but we're just forced to do this stuff. We're forced to retreat like this, but we're not actually forced to do it. I mean, we can make a policy choice that we wanted to. We wanted the school to be a little cheaper and a little smaller, but that's a decision we'd be making. It's not some inevitable force that we just have no say in. So that's kind of my point. That there's a $500,000 sitting right there. Oh, and yet another. There's a $500,000 sitting there simply to level fund per pupil expenditures at the exact same dollar they were last year. There's another several $100,000 between what we're spending and what the state would allow us to spend before we would run into an issue that we would then have to discuss further. But we're pretty far from that question. And then none of this talks about the cost of living going up. So there's a 2% inflation rate, and even a level funded budget is a 2% reduction in services. And we see how all that works. So that's my
Thank you. Sure. Yeah, if it's a correction or need to clarify.
Perry, I just wanted to remind you that I know you were at the last meeting, but I want to remind you that there was a shift in the number of equalized pupils that we were able to count in our budget. And you might recall it was around 50 students that we, that what I called the Hanukkah miracle. In that 1 week, we went up by 50 students. And that was because of the way the state calculates our early education student numbers. And so those students aren't actually additional students, but real students. It's just the way that the state is calculating our early education numbers. Last year, they took 50 students away from us in their calculation. This year, they added back those 50 students. So when you're looking at the per pupil cost, we're looking at the equalized pupil cost. That's not our enrollment. That's the equalized pupil, which includes those sort of 50 extra student numbers that we got for the miscalculation at the state level. Plus, it also includes the higher numbers for certain types of students, high school students, and that type of thing. So our per pupil expenditures going down, that equalized expense per pupil going down, is as a result of that extra 50 students that we were lucky enough to be able to count. If those 50 students weren't there, we'd actually be going up on a per pupil basis. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration when you're looking at it. And also the other thing that needs to be taken into consideration is that, yes, there's a state threshold beyond which we would be, double taxed for the extra amount. But there are also implications in the tax rate that need to be taken into consideration even before we get to that threshold. So every time we spend more per pupil, because the per pupil, not equalized pupil expenditures per pupil is what drives the tax rate, that's where you see the implications of spending more per pupil. So I just want to make sure that you understand those implications. I know you do, you're a math teacher, but those are factors that are important to consider.
If I could come back for just a moment. The second point you're making about how the cost of the school shows up in people's taxes is utterly clear. And that's kind of what I'm getting at when I say these are policy choices to be made.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that the board is not isn't aware that you're making those choices. So any dollar you spend on the school has to come out of taxes from somebody someplace. And the argument that you need, so that becomes, that's just true. It's just true. You can lower taxes to make the school cheaper. You can raise taxes to make the school more expensive. That's what this is about. As far as the question of equalized students and that number bouncing around, it seems like that number, unless you think the school made, the state made an error that they're going to then correct. However they calculate our students, they've got their own weird way of doing it, but it's their weird way of doing it, and those are the numbers we work with. We never do talk about people, and there's reasons for their calculations. Some students are more expensive to teach. They give us more money to teach them. Others, they've got their reasons for that weird calculation. Unless we think that calculation's an error, I think we should take it for what it's worth and base our calculations on what they tell us to base them on.
And we are, but that gave us the extra bonus, is my point.
$100 under what we spent last year, based on the same series of calculations.
I may be able to help here a little bit. So, in terms of trying to get to a stable platform and looking ahead at budgeting and thinking year to year, what we've talked about is not using equalized pupil, but really thinking about enrollment and thinking about enrollment in both directions. If we're constantly basing everything on equalized pupil, it's not the students we're teaching next year. We're creating a budget for next year, and the high school is, I think, a good example. We're losing 50 students from the high school, which is roughly $1 million. Those students are not here. They're not in the building. But we're basing our budget on a number from 2 years back from October. And there are going to be years when this flip-flops, and we're going to have an increase in the number of students for the next year. If we're not basing our budget on enrollment and we're basing it on equalized pupil, then we're going to be shortchanging those students who are coming in. We're going to add 50 students to the high school next year. We need to be looking at enrollment and take the hit on a budget in a year when our equalized pupil number could skyrocket in a year. If we have an influx, if we have a large class coming into the high school and the equalized pupil number is depressing reality because it's looking back, it's not looking forward. So part of what we're trying to do in terms of getting to a stable, as I said, a stable platform is not living right at the threshold where every year we're in a battle to not go over and not being able to respond to enrollment changes, where if we're below the threshold enough, we can go up and take that hit, like I said, in a year and be looking at really funding for the students that are coming in the next year. And I think if you look historically at our individual districts and their budgets, and I was a part of many of those conversations with boards in all of our towns, it was really challenging to have any kind of vision when every year you were figuring out what you were going to cut or what you were going to add. You had no room to breathe. And I don't think that's effective for the district or for our students or for our staff or for anyone. So that, I think, is part of, at least for me, in terms of presenting this budget to the board, is an important consideration in getting the new unified district to a place where we can do what we need to do to support students.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm Heather Noble. I'm a Millbury resident and parent of kiddos at Mary Hogan and at so just along this question about the state number for equalized students and even just the federal component of the budget, I'm just wondering if you can give an opinion, just based on your experience, how much we can anticipate that number to move from what we anticipated to be.
So you're talking about if if the state sees a drop in federal funding, how is that going to trickle down?
Well, that's one component, and then the other is just this, you know, this Hanukkah miracle that Ruth was talking about. Is there any possibility or likelihood that that could shift again, maybe not in our favor? So I guess those are two, kind of, how in flux are those numbers and those components of the budget?
So equalized pupil is based on it's 12 quarter, isn't it 12 quarters? Or it's a 2-year average of our enrollments. So we're always looking back at our enrollments. So next year we are projecting a decrease in our actual enrollment of 50 students. So in the following year when we're budgeting, we'll have that number go down. We were not expecting it to go up this year like it did because they reduced it last year and then they gave those students back to us this year. So we were not expecting it. And that we don't anticipate happening again, but we do anticipate our equalized pupil numbers declining, projected 100 students over the next couple of years. So we're trying to create a budget that is looking forward to that reality because we know we're just going to have fewer students.
So are we not anticipating the number that was given to us prior to the 18? Was that just a shock, like a sort of an anomaly? I mean, because
the equalized pupil number?
Yeah.
We got that on Saturday before the Monday meeting.
Right.
And yes, it was a shock.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It
And
was
we thought
50 more than what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, okay.
We were told, so the way we calculated pre-K in the first year, so that we could count pre-K students. These are students taking, counted in our enrollment. They may be going to a center somewhere else. They're not necessarily in our program. You could count them up to 0.92 in year one. So that was from the AOE that you could count them 0.92. We counted them at 0.92. Some districts didn't count them at 0.92. They counted them lower because they're ultimately 0.46 in terms of an equalized pupil count number. So we expected when there was a correction last year, and when you look at the graph in the budget book, you can see it kind of is like, it looks really good, and then it goes darn, like that. We expected it to come back up halfway. At least that's what Josh and I talked about. We thought it would kind of come up halfway. Instead, it looks like it came up well beyond what we thought it would, and we looked at enrollment and didn't see rationale in the enrollment numbers for that number.
So what we're anticipating for upcoming years is for it to fall pretty significantly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the other question I have is about, with respect to the trickle down of the federal component, what does that look like?
So I think in this initial budget, there's some Title II funding that it's affecting.
Right.
But beyond that, it's impossible to predict just because the federal government seems to be running on continuing resolutions, which means it's level funded. Yeah. But yes, it could get worse.
Yeah. And I do have a follow-up question.
Sure.
I don't want to take anybody else's time, but with this proposed budget, I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this question. Is its kind of vision to maintain the current configuration of infrastructure, that sort of thing, kind of going forward with, and it sort of dawned on me when we were listening to the presentation about technology investments and kind of leveling out access, bandwidth, that sort of thing among all the different places where our kids are educated. I'm just curious what the board's thinking on that component.
So when the finance committee started, one of our sort of 3 mantras that we were talking about was equity, and trying to create a budget that enhanced equity across our district. And I think our educational leaders who presented here tonight did a really good job of talking about what they're doing in their individual areas, whether it's facilities or technology or SPED or curriculum, that is trying to enhance equity, and that's what we're trying to do with our budget. And that's one of the things of why we looked at staffing across the board, licensed staffing, and student assistance services staffing, to see that we're providing an equitable education across our district. In terms of the long-term future, there is a board committee that's headed up by Jennifer that's looking at sort of where are we going in the next few years in the configuration of our district, and what may change and what may have to change given our enrollment declines.
I guess my question is, to what degree are these two kind of issues, there's overlap, there are points of intersection with those issues, like how much do we invest in broadband to make things equitable for students across the district versus kind of that, and I'm going to expose myself as a total geek here, but that Apollo 13, like we got to get them back, guys. Pouring all the stuff on the table. Here's what we have, and making sure that we're being efficient with the resources that we have. So, I mean, I guess, and I'll shut up after this. But I guess my point is, it seems to me there's sort of like we've got this new blended family, right? And this new blended family has a couple of different houses and has just made a down payment on a really great car, and we're not sure if we can afford all these things. And I guess my point is, I think we need to be very cognizant of the equity for all the students in all the schools, both near and far, but also, I guess I just would be encouraging the board to consider the big long-term vision here and make sure that whatever money we're spending, given how tight the purse is right now, that we're spending it wisely.
Fair enough. Thank you. Further comment? Yes.
Yes, I'm Ms. Gutierrez Shoreham. So you spoke about how we want to budget for enrollment, and I agree with that. So I'm wondering the thought process behind cutting a position in Shoreham, which would lead us to have 2 combined sets of classrooms, so 4 grades, when our enrollment is projected to go up 13% next year, another 13% the following year, 1% the next year, so staying pretty flat, and then another 6%. So in just like 2 or 3 years, our combined classrooms would be 26, 27, 34, 40, which we talked about at the last meeting that our goal is to have about 20 or less. Not too low, but 20 is sort of the maximum that we identified as an ideal class size. So that's my question.
So the staffing in terms of enrollment is year by year. The numbers that we predict, for example, number of students coming into kindergarten, are fairly volatile, at least in my experience. When we think we have 15 coming in, we might have 10 or we might have 19. They vacillate quite a lot.
So it could be 25.
It could be 25, exactly. So 1 year, it's possible that 1 year there might be a blended classroom, but if the numbers change, then that has to change and a teacher will be added back. So it's not an interminable decision. It's looking at what what's the student makeup in the next year and what makes sense.
Yeah,
and there's
change in the configurations year by year, then the teachers have to sort of relearn and figure out, okay, now I'm teaching second and third, okay, now I'm back to teaching third, and I don't know that that's good for the students or the teachers.
And there are some schools that have been doing that for a while and some that haven't. And we've talked about that. I think there's shared expertise that can be helpful in thinking about it. We certainly don't want to create situations where every year there's a kind of a grab bag and let's see what happens. I mean, we want to build expertise for teachers within grade levels so that they're every year not going, okay, this year I'm in 1, next year I'm in 4, then I'm in 6, then I'm in 2. So I think that would be challenging. And one of the reasons that we built in our contingency line into our budget too is to have some flexibility if numbers do change dramatically. And as you mentioned, that class of 25 all of a sudden comes in, then we have the ability to add another position in, close to the start of school when we really start to see, okay, we projected this, but we actually got this wrong.
Thank you. Seeing, yes, Jen?
Can we keep going, or are we
Yeah.
done?
We got a couple more minutes here.
Okay.
Yeah. About 5.
On page 53 23 of the budget book, under the facilities, are those are projects for next year? The 1,212,000?
Those, well, that funding source would be coming from funds that the voters would authorize the movement of. Once that movement's authorized, I believe we have access to the funds.
Yes.
Out of the capital reserve fund?
Out of the capital reserve.
Yeah, so those are then projects that we would bring to the board for approval, because we still need to get approval from the board to do anything out of capital reserve.
Okay. I'm just confused about the numbers, because if there was 135,000 in last year's capital reserve, and you're proposing 823 odd for next year's capital reserve,
Yeah.
but there's also 1,548,000 total facilities. Is that like just general maintenance facilities, like lights and utilities, and some for projects? I'm not sure how the numbers all add up.
You say, you said general facilities at 1.5? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
roughly.
Yeah, so that's that's preventative maintenance, that's our fuel costs, that's travel supplies, that's telephones, it's equipment, it's furniture, it's all those other things.
Yeah, it's not construction.
It's not
These are
construction
mostly
projects.
fixing a problem.
Okay, so you have 1.2 proposed that you could do based on an agreed upon vote, and we're proposing to put 823,000 toward these projects in some way or another, and there may be some remaining from this year based on projects that are in existence. Is that?
Right, so it's kind of to give you an idea of, we're moving this 800,000 into capital reserve, we're proposing to, and here's the short list of projects that are over $1 million, of the $21 million worth that they have already given us.
Of the 21 million, we're thinking this is our short list of,
Here's a short
we could use money for this, but we might have to trim that even further based on that. And some of that could maybe come out of the general facilities if there was extra money or not.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Jason.
So, thank you, this is a big ask at a tough time of year. Appreciate that. So, at this point, we've been delivered what we asked for as a board, right, in terms of a level funded, or actually slightly below level funded budget. And I guess this is probably as much of a question for the board to consider as it is for administrators, but ultimately the budget is a tool to accomplish what our district is formed to do. And we coalesced around a vision and a mission and a strategic plan. Back in 2014, 2015 is referenced in the budget book on page 6. And for those who can't see it, our vision is that students reach their full academic potential and be prepared for success as engaged students. And our mission is to provide, and I just lost it because my computer just went nuts. In any case, you can look it up on the website, like everything else
Still
goes scrolling.
I have a paper. Piece
Innovative and rigorous.
Right. I'm sure you know it by heart. And then we lay out, right, some foundational goals, operational educational systems that support learning for all students, educational success, so culture of innovation, continuous improvement, personalized learning experiences, equitable opportunities, high expectations and achievement, and community, engaging community, improve outcomes for all students, right? So these are the goals and the vision and the mission that we have as a district, right? We didn't identify in that process anywhere that level funded budget is a foundational goal, that it's part of our mission or that's part of our values. That's instruction as the board, it's policy decisions, as Perry mentioned earlier, that this board has made in this budget cycle to see what it looks like, right? The board voted for that, fair enough. So I guess my question now is, looking back, considering that the budget is our tool to achieve these things that we've set out, it is this budget that we're considering whether or not to approve in our next meeting. Do I have that right? Is this the best tool to advance the vision, the mission, and the foundational goals that we set out and that we've been working on as a district.
Is that a rhetorical question?
No, I think it's a discussion question because I mean, fundamentally, I think it's the job of this board to be using that as the metric by which we base every single policy decision we make. Right? I mean, if that's what we're supposed to be, if that's what we agreed on, was our sort of guiding principles, everything that we do should be measured against that. And how does this budget measure up? Does it measure up well? Maybe it does. That's the question I think that we need to answer as a board. This might be a budget that really gets us to those goals. We haven't really talked about how it does that through this process. We've talked about the machinery of getting to it, which is a practical thing that we have to do. We can't avoid that. I get that, and we have a tough time frame. But I think we have to have this discussion at some point, and if we don't, we're missing the point of, I think, what we're all supposed to be doing here. So I'd like to see us actually have that discussion as part of our effort to decide on this particular budget.
Yes, Chip.
You know, my response to that, I agree with you, but I think to answer that question, all of those many questions have been asked of the different people that are providing input into the budget, be they principals, facilities, all of it. So all of those different questions are being asked in a very finite manner. For us as a board to address that, I think, I don't have a way to absolutely answer that question. Sure, I'd love to have it be twice as big and we could provide everything. But on the other side, all of those different questions along the way have been supposedly asked. And if the principal or the facilities person or the technical person or anything else says, I can't do that goal, now their goal may be much narrower than what you're saying, then they better stand up and tell us that, because that's the only way that I as a board member can answer that question. So, you know, I don't think it's a bad question, but I don't think it's answered by us just saying it.
Well, but I think we need to create, as a board, create a space to make sure that we get an answer to that question, right? And the answer might be as simple as, yeah, you know, through this process, as we built this budget, we've looked at all these things, and we really feel like we can get there within this framework. Right? Like, that may be the answer, but we need to make sure that we're answering that question if we're going to be living up to those principles that we've set out. And like I said, if that's the answer, great.
So my question would then be to you who are asking the question is, where are you coming from to ask the question in a general way? Are you coming from saying we need to spend more because I don't think, or we need to spend less because, you know, I'm trying to get a sense of where you're coming from other than just asking the question.
My question isn't related to a numbers agenda. It's related to making sure that we always relate our decision-making back to these principles that we've set out as a board. And if this is this budget does that within sort of the practical framework of sort of the realities that we see, then great. You know, good job us. We got there. But I just want to make sure that we take the time and the space and embed that practice in our ongoing work of always checking back against this set of ideals that we have. So I just want to make sure that as a board, we have that discussion. So let's do that. Do people have concerns? Are there areas where we aren't sure with this budget, where, you know, that we haven't heard enough information to feel like, yep, I feel comfortable that we're meeting this goal, or no? You know, that's part of that comfort of getting to a place where we can unanimously recommend a budget is going to be, to what degree does it meet the needs that we've set out in that vision.
Yep.
I would respond to say that the mission and vision is not just ours, it's also the administration's, and that I have to have faith that they are keeping that in mind as they bring forth their decisions to us. I would agree with Chip, I can't really answer the question completely. I sort of have to put my faith in those who are who are in the weeds doing the work. And I would hope that if there was a glaring lack of not being able to accomplish what we have in our vision and mission, we would hear about it. I would hope that. And then we also, we have that. We also have to work within the real world constraints or financial constraints, when I think that's trying to balance those two. And I guess I feel comfortable so far along in the process that has remained. But I do appreciate that it needs to be continually part of our thinking. Perry.
I was thinking about Jason's point in a slightly different way. And I think last year our budget was all about survival. It was the first time that Peter and his gang put together a budget. And you do what you can, and this happens over and over again with this kind of change. This year, I was very impressed that they fixed all the things they saw broken in the first year's budget. And that's also a classic thing I've seen in my observations of how these systems work. So that's really good. But I think we're at a stage now that next year we can be explicit as we make the budget that may be clearer about these goals that we set up a few years ago. So I just don't think we were quite ready and able to do it. But with 2 years under our belts, I think we're ready next year. And I'd love to see us make that a priority, to have explicit conversations about how these things tie together. And yes, we need every single person feeding into the budget worrying about this. But as a board, I think we need to take a perspective that may be a slightly larger point of view. And I think we can do it if we start in March.
Further comment? We do have a mandatory 9 o'clock executive session, and we're bumping up against that. Bjarke, you did come in late. I know you were at a concert. While this is the board discussion time, I do want to give you the opportunity to make your comment.
Thank you.
Given our time crunch.
First meeting that we had two meetings ago, Stubb talked about, and I apologize if somebody talked about this, but the union's willingness to be creative, to work with people about, can we find solutions to reduce cost? The board has reached out, and I think tried to do that in some ways. Has reached out to teachers and say, hey, let's figure out how maybe we can do things through attrition and not through rifts if necessary. We want to have cuts, but do it through attrition. Just to put it out there, we still have a member who is very close and I think reasonably able to work within the boundary, the guidelines of what was recently said of, hey, talk to us, let's be creative. I talked to that person very recently, is still waiting on a follow-up response. I'm happy to stay after and talk about that the same way I was after that first meeting. I'd really encourage us, it's an opportunity to save money. Let's do it.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
So I think we can do that with this budget, and my goal is to convince you at our next meeting, or if not before. But I also want to, I meant what I said, I really want everybody to vote for this budget, so I don't know that we have time now, given our crunch, but if there are things that you have concerns about, and I've heard from the Finance Committee, but if there are things you have concerns about, please reach out to me or Peter or Josh, and let's talk about them so that we can meet, so everybody can feel at least comfortable. It's not going to be everybody gets everything they want necessarily, but everybody feels comfortable. So with voting for the budget. So I'm just offering that invitation before our next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for once again coming for a long school board meeting. I would welcome a motion to go into executive session following a little bit of a recess. Are we? Oh, I'm sorry. It would be easier if we just went. We're going to go to the library for our executive session, just so they can take their stuff down. A motion to go into executive session. All those in favor of going to executive session, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Move.